Should billionaires be taxed based on their wealth? A new ballot initiative in California says yes, but the Democratic governor out there says no. Joining us, former California Democratic Senator Barbara Boxer, professor of public policy and economics at the University of Michigan's Ford School of Public Policy, Betsy Stevenson, and politics reporter at Semaphore, Dave Weigel. Dave, lay out the foundation of this for us. What exactly is this California initiative asking for?
Well, you set it up pretty well. It's asking for a tax on wealth, not income taxes. The question of how to tax wealth, which has been around for quite a while, which Elizabeth Warren really attacked in the 2020 campaign, was what to do about the capital and pieces of wealth owned by billionaires, how to get some revenue from that for the state. The referendum would do that, would come up with a way to do that, and they've attracted, by my count this morning, I think it's still coming in, with tens of millions of dollars into a PAC funded by billionaires to stop it. The argument being that the state benefits right now from having billionaires in it, benefits from the IPOs they create, the taxes the state gets from those. You'd waste that all if you come up with any mechanism to take their wealth away because they can quit. And the California, you've seen Gavin Newsom's role in this. Newsom doesn't like this idea because California is competing with other states that can promise zero taxation of the resources and assets we're talking about to these billionaires.
So doesn't he have a point, Barbara? We've seen in other states that have tried to pass a wealth tax or who have passed a wealth tax, those billionaires, those very rich people, move to friendlier places. Lots of movement, for instance, to Florida.
Absolutely. And it's happening right here, right now, before the vote. A couple of the founders of Google. I mean, it makes me really sad that people are so interested in building so much wealth that they can't even stay in the state that made them wealthy. But that is the fact. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Gavin Newsom. I know he sees, where the taxes are coming from. We don't want to lose high-income people. I just want to say one thing in closing this. Let's look at the big picture. This has to be done at the national level. I agree with Elizabeth Warren, and I agree with her bill, and I would be a co-sponsor of it. There's only 75,000 individuals worth $50 million or more in this country. They are paying, on average, a lower effective rate than a teacher or a nurse or a truck driver. And then you put on top of that the big, beautiful bill, which gave these people even more. We need to do something. It ought to be at the national level. Otherwise, people will move around and states will get hurt.
Betsy, how do you get at it, though? Because I think the senator's right to bring up the federal aspect of this, that people can just move around. It's got to be a federal bill. But how do you actually get at the wealth fairly? Because a lot of these CEOs, one of the reasons why they pay such a low tax rate is that they don't have an income, or they have a very low income on paper when they're actually accumulating quite a bit of money, through stocks and equity, et cetera. How do you get at that fairly?
Well, I mean, one thing is that we have designed a system that lets them that allows them to pretend that they have very little income, even though they spend as if they have a lot of income. What they do is that income stays tied up in stocks that are appreciating in value, so they can see on paper they're getting wealthier. They go to banks, they structure financial deals so that they can borrow against that. I want to just emphasize for people the difference between thinking about millionaire tax, like think about Washington State that's trying to introduce an income tax only on the amount of income people earn above $1 million, and a tax on billionaires. If you're a millionaire in wealth, you could spend $100,000 a year and you'd be out of money in 10 years. A billionaire can spend $100,000 a year for 10,000 years. So that is a long time that they get to spend a ton of money. And one of the things that makes me sad is that people would leave a state like California because they don't want to pay 5% in taxes when they can't actually spend that wealth in their lifetime. And what they're basically saying is,
why don't they want to? What's the holdup? Why?
think it's because of their ego. They think that they know what to do best. And so that's really about power more than it is about, spending. And I think if we're going to be in a democracy, they need to give some of that power back to the rest of the voters, to the government that the voters have elected, to provide the things that the society wants.
So there are some federal moves to try to get this done. Congress has been working on a few different proposals. There's also a proposal by a couple of Democratic senators, Dave, that doesn't talk about taxing billionaires, but instead talks about taking away income tax from people who make, I think in one of the scenarios, it's less than $80,000. And in another scenario, it's a little bit less than that. So there's an effort being made here. I think there are people in Congress who realize that this is a political necessity and perhaps something that they can win with in the next election cycle.
It's a very chaotic debate inside the party because I can't even limit it to two factions, but let's say generally there's one faction of Democrats who say we need to get elected and prove the government works and that it's worth paying taxes in order to get better health care, to get better transportation, to get better services, et cetera. And there's the other faction of Democrats that are worried that just doesn't work. It's too easy to demagogue their failures in big cities sometimes. Sometimes there are failures that people are paying a lot of money for. You ask somebody in an expensive part of San Francisco if they're getting services as good as somebody in a good part of San Jose. There are real debates inside the Democratic Party about whether that works. So what you're seeing from Chris Van Hollen, Cory Booker, and in California from Katie Porter is this promise from Democrats that we're going to shrink the tax base, get more people who are making less money off of it so they pay nothing and they can spend money on themselves, and tax the ultra-rich more. It's very contentious because to a lot of Democrats that says you're never going to get the kind of welfare state that a lot of them joined the party to create if you tell people that taxation is inherently bad, you're better off if you're not paying it, but if you make too much money, if you're a billionaire, then you should be paying for everybody else. They worry that's a very slippery slope and you lose the argument that makes people want to vote for Democrats in the first place.
I think people would love to pay more taxes, given no one wants to pay more taxes. But I think it would be easier to swallow if services were rendered for those taxes, good services were rendered. And I think you bring up a good point that even in places where taxes are very high, the services can feel a little wanting. Dave, always good to have you. Just to be on the record so I don't mess it up, Van Hollen's proposal is no income tax for individuals under $46,000, married couples making under $92,000. Senator Booker, the number's slightly different. It's for individuals under $37,500 and for married couples under $75,000. All right, Dave Weigel, Barbara Boxer, thank you guys so much for joining us.